Welcome to our live Q&A. I'm really excited to get going here. I got my computer here, and yeah, I'm ready to go. So I'm going to be answering your questions here for the next couple of hours, and we'll just chat. We'll bring people in, and we'll just have a good time overall. So let's. Those of you who are actually in the chat, you guys have some questions for me? Let's see what we got. Or let's maybe start with one of these.
Start with one of the questions from our followers on Twitter.
Great.
So yeah, we're going to start with one of our first ones, which is from @Malbalzor. And Steven, how do you deal with traps and passive perception?
Oh, okay. Passive perception. So passive perception, for maybe those who don't know, is the idea of essentially that you just have you're constantly rolling a 10 at all times. So if I have a +1 wisdom modifier at all times, I just have a +1. So I would have a total of 11 perception. So perception is one of those things that it sort of is hard with it being a spoken imagination game. If I'm constantly looking for traps, or if I'm looking in a room to try to detect whether or not someone is a horrible monster, then the passive perception would allow me to sort of be able to see without calling for a perception check. So I go back and forth. It wasn't in 3.5, which is what I started. I started playing a game that I invented, and then I moved to 3.5 when I could finally convince my parents to buy me the books. But there's no passive perception in 3.5, so anytime you wanted someone to notice something, it was you'd call for a perception check. And then in 4th, they introduced a passive perception. And then I think in Pathfinder there wasn't a passive perception. I go back and forth. I always forget, unless there's something hidden, to actually call for a perception check, or to even look at passive perception. So that's a number that I just wish every player had on their hat, just a hat with their passive perception number. And specifically in regards to traps, usually I assume that whoever is at the front is looking for traps, or I like the players to call that they are checking for traps. I know it slows things down a lot, but I know personally, if I'm just walking through a hallway, I'm not necessarily looking for traps. I might be noticing something, but if a trap is hidden, so if it's above a 10 or something, you pretty much are gonna have to be. But then of course that's what passive perception is.
So if a player triggers a trap, or is getting close to, where does that line fall? Do you just let them trigger, then have to make a dex save, or or do you go all right, make a perception check to see?
Usually I'll say make a perception check, which then of course they know that the trap is there. But if they don't get the perception check right, then they're going to trigger the trap.
Right, and at which point they will have to make a dex save or a dex
save,
right?
or con. And now there's all kinds of saves now in 5th edition. So I go back and forth on whether or not to use it. I really like the idea of passive perception when I can remember to use it, which is almost always when stuff is hidden. But I think it's really useful. So the way that I usually handle it when I can remember that passive perception is a thing is I'll have the number already there sometimes, or I'll ask as people are approaching something, what's everyone's passive perception? And they'll give me their numbers, and I say, great, you guys see this. Or if you're approaching a trap and I know what your passive perception is, I can just tell you without having to say, I'm going to make a perception roll down this hallway. You just say, you see the tripwire as you go down the hallway.
My characters usually have horrible perception, so I usually trigger everything. I just trigger
low
everything.
Wisdom saves. Traps in dungeons are always that big. Do you have them check every square and really hide the traps, or do you just assume that they're just always looking for traps? So
you got one over there. Or you want another one?
Yeah, let's look at the chat. Okay. Let's do this big one. All right. I'm going to throw my question up on the chat now. This is League of Kashakani. Hi Mal. Oh, there. We just answered your question. Yeah. Malbazar. I know. I hopefully you didn't just miss that. All right.
So we're
starting to get some questions. So let's see. League of Kashakunkai. I'm going to throw my question up on the chat now. That way it's just there. I've been working on making my own homebrew campaign for a while now. My biggest issue is that I'm just a huge perfectionist, and it's really hard for me to overcome that in making the setting and counter story and all the aspects of the campaign. Yeah. It's a huge... Okay. Do you have any advice for me to help get past that? Okay. So I feel you. Essentially, the question boils down to you want to have sort of control. I'm going to call you League. So League, you want to have total control over your world. Essentially, you want everything to be perfect. The truth is, it's never going to be perfect. Like I have never in my life done something that is completely perfect. I did some improv comedy in college, and something that sort of taught me is to get out of your head a little bit. There's nothing more freeing than to just come into a situation and not have like any prep done, and then be able to like finish and have it turn out really well, to like just run by the seat of your pants. Some of our best sessions in Threshold have been the town, when we're just mulling about town. And almost always, those are stuff that I have not prepped at all. I think in this episode that'll air tomorrow, you'll see during the afterwards, I literally, on Monday, I'll pull out my pad and I'll show you guys exactly what I have prepped, which is I drew a map of the city, I drew a doodle of a sphinx, and I did some roads.
Well, I like how you use kind of our questions as kind of fuel for your role building in the moment. You know,
right?
Where we go, hey Steven, is there an inn somewhere? And then use that. Like, yes, there is an inn. It's called the, and then you think of a name right off the top of your head.
Yeah. So the best thing that I could tell you about being perfect is a lot of the time, like your gut instinct is going to be the thing, and anything that you do, that you build, is perfect. No one can really tell you otherwise because it's your world. Right. So if you start to feel yourself maybe getting a little too perfectionist, take a step back and just maybe stop right there, or give yourself enough of a vision of what you want to do that you can talk about it. Of course, it does take a lot of practice. I know, like, again, going back to improv, like getting up on stage with like not knowing what you're supposed to say and then having people just expect you to say it is really nerve-wracking. But at the same time, we kind of do it all day, every day in just conversation. Like, I don't know I did not know how I was going to answer this question, but I just start and I kind of have a feeling in my mind of what I want to do. And in the end, you just have to go with it, because you're never going to be able to prep for every scenario your players are going to do. And a lot of the time, if you just sort of figure out what they want and give that to them, you're going to have a great time. So I would say the best advice I could give you is try sitting down at a session with having just a general idea of what you want to do, and then just see where it goes. And if you have just a general image in your head and try to fit stuff to that, that'd be my best advice, is to just learn to let it go. And maybe if that's if I don't know if you're in an area where there's improv or something like that, that's kind of a great exercise in sort of getting out of your own head and just learning to, with other people, learn to tell a story. There's lots of good classes. So I hope that answered your question, League.
Here's a good one, Steven, I think that you might be able to help people with. It's from our friend at Not So Strawberry.
Oh, okay.
It's story versus where the dice lay. It's basically like such as, you know, when Christine turned to stone.
Sure.
You know, how do you battle the feeling of, I'm going to let this happen because of good story reasons, versus how do I accept the dice roll? Dice
versus story. There's a lot there's a lot of RPG systems that one of the first things they say is anytime something happens in which the outcome will affect the story, like when there's a risk of failing, that's when you need to roll the dice. And I certainly believe in that. Otherwise, if like the dice totally govern the game, that's more like what a computer does on a video game, where it's constantly rolling to see how your feet, it's doing numbers. Are your feet touching the ground? Yeah. Are you falling? It's doing all these checks. Role-playing games, we don't have time to do all that because that'd be the most boring. Roll for right foot, roll for left foot, roll for right foot, roll for left foot.
Natural one, you trip.
I actually would love to write rules for that the worst RPG in the world.
I feel that would be like Twitch plays Pokemon, where it's just we're just like
exactly. Twitch plays Pokemon is exactly that thing where normally in Pokemon you take for granted the ability that you can just hit the button forward, but Twitch was like there was a significant chance to whether or not you were able to do anything. I am a story first kind of a DM. I have played with a lot of people who are very rules heavy or very dice heavy, but especially if the story is going to collapse, if the dice show you something that you don't want them to. Oh, well, welcome, Strawberry. I'm answering your question right now. If the dice fall in a way that they're going to totally destroy your story, in a way that won't make the story more interesting, then I would say ignore them. But if there's a chance, like, yes, had I let Christine, spoiler alert, if I had let Christine remain petrified, that would have completely changed the story to now be about the characters trying to revive Christine.
Right. Thus excluding Pamela from being able to play. Unless she was like some sort of like metaphysical apparition or something.
Yeah, or she could roll up a new character, or we could just have her sit out for a couple of weeks until we brought her back. But really, at the end of the day, the story that I want to tell, in a way, sort of requires Christine's presence, and requires a lot of these characters' presence. I will only let people die if either they do something stupid or heroic, or really if it's in a place where it would make sense narrative-wise for their character to die. I don't want just random PC deaths. If this was more like just a game, right, I would maybe just let Christine die. Especially, I don't necessarily want my characters to die unless they're doing something heroic. Like, you guys deserve heroes' deaths. Yeah. If you set up a situation where you get to die a hero's death, then that's fantastic. Then I'll kill you a million ways from Sunday. But D&D is not Call of Cthulhu.
Yeah.
And I don't like the idea that a couple of bad dice rolls, which really, in this case, if I had given Christine the extra attack that she should have a couple of times, she probably would have dealt enough damage to kill the monster and not have had to make the save at that point anyway. Or had I given her that extra attack earlier.
There's a million what ifs to that.
Yeah.
If I would have able to hit it with one of my things.
Sure, exactly. It was 10 damage that it had left when she had to make that number.
And Pamela's a notoriously horrible roller.
Yeah. So to sort of answer a bit more concisely, I think that it is more important that you feel out what your group wants. If your group doesn't mind having a senseless death, if the dice show it, then that's great. But if you think that, Pamela would have probably been pretty upset with me had I killed Christine in that moment. Well,
and I was sitting right next to her, and I was like consoling her while she was petrified. I'm going, "You're not dead. Like, relax. Like, you'll be fine." Which is it would be a Jamie thing to do as well.
Yeah, that would be a Jamie thing. So you just got to feel it out, and I would say preserve characters before killing them in Dungeons and Dragons. I was running a Call of Cthulhu. I'll tweet when this is over, or actually I'll do it right now.
Yeah. Our death wall.
I have a wall of death of Call of Cthulhu characters. Oh, here, I'll get Eric in there. Of Call of Cthulhu characters that I've killed, because in Call of Cthulhu, you're meant to die. Like, you are way over your head. There are horrible monsters that you're going to be unable to possibly hope to fight. and my death wall. There we go. Tweeted. So in Call of Cthulhu, kill people because that's the game. But in Dungeons and Dragons, the way that the level system works and everything, you're kind of expected to be able to gain some power and die at the correct moment, because I don't want death to be just sort of meaningless and commonplace like it is in Call of Cthulhu, because that makes these characters less heroic. Perhaps even in your gritty fantasy world, your characters are super... maybe the world is super lethal like Game of Thrones, but then there are certain characters that, can narrowly get out of these situations. Or sometimes death can be used as a shock value. Death is a really important storytelling thing, and so I would much rather have the death be a good story moment than just a random thing that happens, unless that random thing influences the story well. So it's kind of a balance, and you have to feel it out, but really do whatever is more fun. Let's see. Oh, a Google form for the questions. That might. I think we're good. I think we're good this way. Just bouncing back and forth.
Sure.
Wilver, I already answered League's question, so I hope that gave you some good things to think about.
You want to read this one from Twitter, or do you
I'll answer Wilver's question because I kind of already talked about it. Okay. My problem was I didn't know when to stop coming up with stuff. Oh, okay. I have this issue too when you're coming up. So you're writing a fantasy world and you want to like write out every little detail about it. You want to like fill in every nook and cranny and tell this awesome world. I totally get that. That's called the Threshold Wiki. And I don't know if you guys have been on there. I'm sure we have. We've started putting links in our videos to it. But that is essentially, a lot of it is me just like, okay, and there's this stuff and there's this stuff. And it's a way that I want to get the information out of my own head, because the information, if you've created all this stuff, doesn't do you any good unless your players can access it. Which is why I love the wiki, because now I've talked about doing the collaborative world with multiple people. It's sort of Threshold is the anchor. There's been a lot of talk on. I'll probably talk about that later. But I have a lot of pages and stuff that, you go down these rabbit holes, and those are all contextual stuff that can add information. But if it's not something that's going to get touched on in your story or is going to matter to your story and to your players, there isn't a ton of reason to do it. I would recommend, again, taking a step back, giving it a try with just saying, let's go into this blind and sort of create these details as it goes on, or have those details even better in the back of your mind and just give them to your players when it comes up, like Moraean bread bowls, or I have some like Morayish gods and stuff that are there in the back of my head that we just haven't gotten to. So I totally get that bug, but at a certain point you have to say, you know what, this is not information that's going to be interesting to my players. I'll write this for me and maybe write it down in a document or something that if they're interested in, they can look at it.
I need to read that wiki more, because you're dropping like leads to a bunch of stuff.
There is a spoiler on the wiki for a session that you guys have not played yet.
And there's this,
Yes, I've started like putting in serious spoilers in the wiki just to see if people will notice.
No, I don't.
There's
scare them away.
Yeah, well, it's nothing major. It's something that's going to happen at the beginning of our session tomorrow.
So like, is it like Christine's baby's name or something like that?
No. But there's lots of family members and stuff, and Eric and I were like working together to do the whole list of all the characters that we've come across, and there's a lot.
There's a lot so far, yeah.
There's like all the people in like Haddock, and I'm sure there's some.
Does King Bunny have a page?
No, King Bunny's not even on there. We got to put King Bunny on there.
King Bunny's my favorite NPC that I've.
And if we've missed characters that you guys like love and want to see, feel free to add them. The community is supposed to. I want you guys to add to the world of Threshold too, because the beauty is I can always, if something isn't going to jive with what I have planned, I can always fix it or find a way to make it work. But I just want to like have collaboration, and so that way I don't have to like pour my whole brain into this. We can all do it together and create a fully realized world. I know that doesn't exactly answer Wilver's question, but
here's a question from 1337 Sid. I have the Twitch.
Oh, okay.
It's for someone that hasn't played since 3.5.
Okay.
What has changed the most?
3.5 to 5e. So I played. I started on 3.5. Mm-hmm. I went to 4 because I was like, oh, there's a new edition, and I played a whole campaign in it, but I hated it.
Yeah. Full disclosure, I hate 4th edition. I don't like it at all.
It took out 5th is a total reversal. I played a lot of Pathfinder, which is like 3.5 plus 3.75. But the difference between 3.5 and 5e is sort of the opposite between the difference of 3.5 and 4th. Where 4th added a lot of stuff like at-will powers and ways to make your character feel more like a video game. 5 has sort of stripped a lot of that stuff away. A lot of like the complicated tables and a lot of the math and the bonuses that happen in 3.5 get completely removed. Pretty much all the bonuses and minuses that you can get, other than like I think up to +3 on other than +3 on a, I'm getting tweets. Other than a +3 for like a +3 weapon, the only things that you're getting mostly are either advantage or disadvantage, which means you're rolling 2d20s, which is like everyone's dream, where you roll a dice and you go, oh, I hate that. I wish I could roll another one. And so I really like that system. I got to start using it more of just handing it out willy-nilly, because it's really designed for like, oh, what's that? The statue's on top of her. She's probably disadvantaged. Oh, what's that? You're blinded. You have a disadvantage. Probably. And they can't, now they cancel each other out, or you're both at disadvantage. Like, it's so easy to do. And they really have focused more on storytelling or settings. Like most of your powers come back after a long rest, which isn't necessarily an amount of time. It is an amount of time, but it's not like, okay, 59 minutes is up, like we're good to go. It's like you can be doing things during your rest, and it really lends itself to a storytelling element. If you are really into numbers crunching and your favorite thing is like what kind of builds you can do, I would maybe steer you more towards a Pathfinder. If you more like something that is a little more rules meaty than Fate, but still kind of more narrative and tonally driven, I would definitely say 5th edition is the way to go. There is a fantastic... the art is fantastic. Hand me the player's handbook. It's right there. The art's fantastic.
Except for one picture.
Which picture?
Oh, the effing gnome. The gnome.
Oh, it's a gnome. I don't know. Gross. I don't look at gnomes. But like the art is really good. They've done a really good job of including different types of character designs other than just kinds of tonal stuff that you don't necessarily get in a regular fantasy book. I would definitely say give the player's handbook a try. Play around a little bit. They have the materials are free, I think, on Wizards, at least for the most basic rules and the most basic characters. So it's really easy to read them up and give them a try, which I think is a really great thing that they're doing, is to try to make Dungeons and Dragons accessible to people who maybe don't have hundreds of dollars lying around to buy the books, but you can at least still get the rules and be able to essentially try it out. I would definitely say give it a look, but a lot of it is sort of a stripped down, less rulesy, more story and like context driven game, which works really well for Threshold. Yeah.
Here's a question that I think is particularly interesting.
Okay.
It's from this guy on Twitch, Jay McCook.
Oh, okay.
Jay McCook. And it's when is theater of the mind more appropriate than mapping, or vice versa?
Cool.
Because we kind of bouncing back and forth between, like we will put stuff on the table and then, maybe use it sometimes. It's, we don't really go hex by hex for each square is, whatever.
Here's what it comes down to for me. It's all about speed. If it takes time to draw out a map and to put your figures. If you're in a big confusing battlefield, using miniatures is probably not going to be that useful, because it kind of adds to the disorientation of like what's around me. If you're in a hall with like we used for our Medusa fight, I drew a map because there was one enemy and the players, and it was kind of I could see ahead that there was going to be some like, okay, we're surrounding her, and it's like, well, which side of her are you on? Yeah. And are we flanking her? Are we, rather than like deal with that, it was easier just to draw the room out real fast and to put the miniatures down. Whereas in some other times, if there's like 6 guards that you guys are going to fight, I would much rather say, let's not draw it. You're going to defeat these guards. I mean, again, if there's a significant chance that your players are just going to like plow through the event, or if they're just meant to win this fight, why not just give them the benefit of the doubt and just have us describe it as cool as possible and roll some dice? So for me, the short answer is speed. Whatever's going to be more fast and easy to keep combat from slogging. If having a bunch of miniatures on the field is going to slog it down, then just do it in your head. If it's going to be really complicated with having to remind everyone where they're positioned and how far away they are from everyone and whether or not this is a line or a cone, then I would say get your map out and just take the extra couple of seconds to draw and put your miniatures down. And that way you can kind of then speed through the rest of combat by having people move their stuff. So those are my thoughts on when to use theater of the mind and when to use an actual grid base. I hope that answers your question.
Real quick from Wilver on Twitch. Any plans for releasing a podcast? Yes.
Yeah, I think on our site now, I haven't been working with that too much.
But we're getting it to where all Threshold episodes have been converted to podcast. You can stream on our Podbean website, our Podbean account.
Yeah, I think it's Podbean.
I think it's d6mafia.podbean.com.
Yeah.
Yes. And also we are starting to launch a new podcast called Let's Roll, where it's just basically a kind of a roundtable forum kind of situation.
Yeah.
So look out for that from
I'm
D6
seeing
Mafia.
a couple things about good DM can work around bad dice. I see. Okay. A couple. I'm seeing the Strawberry posted a link to our wiki, and someone. Let's see who. There it is. Chicks XSY. I'm gonna call you Chick. Hey Chick, you're running a campaign for separate parties at the same time. Any other practical ideas for coordinating? Yeah, it's gonna be you're in a tough spot trying to coordinate 2 campaigns. I would definitely say do the wiki, and I would assign because again, this is kind of something that I want to start doing with Threshold. Is I have some people that I'm talking to who are gonna run games that take place in the world. I have one person who wants to continue the story of the Cold Iron Wars, and some people who want to do some adventures like in, I think, Pearl Shaw, which is like the swine farm in Erin.
And we love that.
Yeah, absolutely. But it now just means that there's going to be some coordination, like to make sure that the world still matches up, because that's kind of the whole point of this. So what I would do, and what I'm going to try to have people do, is either have since you're the DM of both games, assign one player who maybe who's kind of more of a writer type. There's probably going to be one in your campaign, and just have them write a couple of, as long as they want, even if it's just a paragraph or 2 of a summary of what happened in that event. So you in that episode, and that way you're going to be able to sort of keep it straight what's happening in both of them. I would also say have a notebook for each one separately. And so you aren't like flipping back and forth through it. Or do a wiki. It's actually, now that we're figuring it out, it's going to be fantastic, I think, for that purpose. Because you could put stats and stuff in there if you wanted to, or checklists of things that are going to happen or have happened. I eventually would like if there's other games that are going to be run, to have them have full, have like a page for their adventures and just have a couple sentences at a time of what happens, and then have the wiki. Then either we can edit it or they can edit it, depending on what's going on, to keep the pages updated for stuff that's happened. Which again is a little bit more it's more paperwork, but that's really what's going to happen when you're sharing a world, is just making sure there's a record of what's going on. Which is why I think the shared world is only going to work if there's an anchor. There's a lot of talk on D&D Next. They have a sticky tab at the top I saw today, which is talking about putting together, they're basically having DMs apply to be part of whatever shared world it is. But the top comment, and I agree with this guy, is like, there isn't like, there's too many cooks trying to set this whole thing up.
Spoiling the broth.
The broth is going to get spoiled.
The broth is horrible.
Because without an anchor, it's going to be really tough to sort of set up a world where everyone kind of has complete control of their own corner. Here, I've painted some pretty broad strokes of this world with some like higher detail in between, but at least that way there's sort of an editor-in-chief who it's essentially like writing for a TV show. You need a showrunner, or you need someone to say like, yes, no, this is the tone that we're going for. This works. Let's see if we can do this way. And if you can, or for the DMs, it's really easy because if you can stay sort of within a little bit more of the step that's been established with the show to look at as a template for tone and for sort of what is canon and what isn't, then you can have total free reign, and like what parts to avoid. And otherwise we're going to have a ton of conflicting stuff where it's, people are like, well, we blew up the whole earth. And it's like, well, no, you didn't, because our campaign is still going and the earth didn't get blown up. Or like, no, there are no firearms. Well, yes, there are firearms over here in this part of the world. Like,
it gets messy.
It's going to get real messy real fast.
Here is a question from Twitter.
Okay.
From TwitMagic.
Yeah.
It is from @RosaSkyer.
Okay.
What do you adventurers do in wilderness anyway?
Oh yeah.
I have this large forest. Don't know what to do with it. So what do you do with what is your stance? What is your perspective on? We're going through a big forest to get from point A to point B. How do you tackle the forest?
The DM's guide for this edition has a really great little paragraph. Or even just a couple of sentences, but it essentially boils down to this. You have to figure out what they talk about journeys, like what is happening on this journey, particularly through the wilderness. Unless there is significant chance that the players are going to get lost, then there's no need to do any kind of check. Just have them get through the forest. But if the forest is supposed to be a scary thing that you can get lost in and there's mind games, then you need to have the adventure be going through the forest. That's a whole leg of the adventure, like 1 or 2 sessions. Really, you have to, for me, anytime I have a wilderness journey, I have to decide what kind of campaign I'm running. Is the journey through the forest the adventure, or is it just a formality getting to the real adventure? If you're looking for an ancient temple, and part of the fun is going to be discovering it through the jungle, then maybe set up a whole arc where you're going through and like worrying about food, worrying about water, worrying about carrying capacity. But if all of that sounds really boring to your players, where they're not going to have fun trying to like eke out a survival, or if they're just going to have the awesome ranger who's just going to be making their survival check and passing it with flying colors every time, then maybe the forest isn't that big of a deal and just kind of move through it so you can get to the meat of your excitement. That being said, forests, I don't know if you've ever like wandered into a forest, but forests are scary.
Forests are scary.
There's bears that live, or there's fucking owl bears that can live in your forest. Mm-hmm. And a forest is we have this mythical idea of a forest from all of these older
story tales.
Yeah, especially these German, like Hansel and Gretel go into the woods, and there's a fucking house made of candy. just in the middle of the woods, and they stumble upon it, and there's a witch inside.
A lot of strange things happen in the woods.
Yeah, exactly. So
nothing. No. Okay, good.
what kind of campaign are you running, and how does your forest influence your theme? If a theme or the tone of your campaign is the world is mysterious and largely unexplored, then perhaps the adventure then is to go into the woods and to really spend the time cutting through the vines and the branches to get to whatever it is you're looking for. Or maybe you're just lost and finding your way out. If your campaign is more of a huge cityscape and nature is something separate from civilization and not a everyday part of what people are doing, then maybe it's the opposite, where nature is easily tamed and you can just, storm through, and maybe you have to defend the nature from the city. It's sort of the same question of what do you do in a city? Mm-hmm. Is there a chance that you're going to get lost on your way to the shop through the winding maze? Those are sort of the questions that we forget to ask ourselves, because we just say I'm going to find the magic shop, and then I maybe have to make a gather information check to figure out where one is. But maybe the city is so dense that you can get lost just like a forest. The converse is absolutely true. I think we just have this notion that the forest is separate, when really it's just another environment. What is the adventure you're having in that environment? Is it really gritty, or is it maybe just something that we need to cut through to get to the next section?
We need to apologize to Shadow Fox Alley for not being able to stream us as well. Hopefully that issue will be resolved soon.
Oh no.
Yeah, sorry. It's a Twitch thing. It's not really an us thing.
Are we at in HD or no? We're in SD. Yeah, so unless we want to get down to potato quality.
I don't want to film on a potato.
We are uploading to YouTube. Hopefully.
Yeah, we're uploading to YouTube. We're gonna upload this to YouTube as well. So when it's all done, perhaps our upload speed just isn't as good. Yeah, we're at 480.
That was a good one. I saw over here. Oh yes, this one. So our friend at DWD Harrison, we call him Harrison.
Hey Harrison.
Hey Harrison. I've noticed there's a lack of religious characters in Threshold. Is that a story reason or just how things went down?
It's just how things went down. Without a cleric, there's not a cleric in the main party, which means divine magic is significantly underrepresented. We have been I wanted to explore, because we had 2 arcane casters. The emphasis has really been more on what makes a warlock different than a wizard.
Right. I think.
And now, of course, we're adding on an extra element at the
How is a rogue
Sunday.
Different than a warlock?
No, the extra element that we're going to see now is how is a sorcerer different from a wizard, different from a warlock.
Right.
And we're going to see that. I introduced the character last session, so I guess the one that airs Monday, you'll see that character start to get introduced. So it is not a story reason. There actually is, and again, I'll point you to the wiki. There's quite a few gods that we have talked about and that I have mentioned that does play sort of a larger part. But because none of the characters and none of my players really knew about the gods, and I didn't necessarily have the gods designed when I was creating this world, we sort of just have an underrepresentation of divine magic, something that I am trying to overcome now. We're gonna get more clerics and more divine magic. We haven't had any druids. We haven't had no paladins. And that there are quite a few gods. I have 2 different creation myths depending on if you are on Aeron or on Syraxis. They have different versions of some of the same gods. And we're gonna get more and more into that. At least I'm gonna try to, because there's some really awesome stories that can be told there. But without a cleric, it is harder to make the gods matter, especially when Rasper is a Forsaken, which means he's like, fuck the gods.
Right. So here's my question to you then.
Okay.
I'm by nature a warlock.
Mm-hmm.
How would you differentiate the warlock from a cleric?
It's a really subtle thing. First off, clerics worship gods,
right,
where you can get your power from fae or other like outside beings.
So could warlocks get their powers from gods then?
Yes.
Okay.
But the reason why they probably won't is the subtle distinction, whereas a cleric is devoted to a god and asks for its blessing, like, please God, let me heal this person. Right. A warlock says, hey God, I will give you what you want if you give me what I want. The warlock has a selfish quality to him that he's getting something out of the deal.
Right.
So it's sort of like it's the difference between making a deal with a devil and being a cultist to a evil god. A cultist is in blind devotion and will do whatever the god asks, where a warlock, he might have some contractual obligations, but he's still, for the most part, a free agent.
Yes. Through thick and thin.
Yes. Let's go to our Twitch. Let's see what we got. I'll do this because it'll be fast. The Tyranny of Dragons storyline. I haven't read them. I haven't done too many like renditions of pre-generated campaigns. I have been running Massive Nyarlathotep for Call of Cthulhu because Call of Cthulhu takes so much prep work to get a mystery together that you almost have to either write your own book and then run it all at once. It's really hard to do session to session. But the last campaign that I ran was Pathfinder's Curse of the Crimson Throne, and that campaign really picked up when we went off the rails. So I tend to try not to read those just because they're expensive. So I haven't read the Tyranny of Dragons storyline, so I can't vouch for whether or not they're awful or not. So unfortunately, I don't have any thoughts on that. Let's see. Question: have you had to deal with players contesting your rules due to munchkining or rule Naziing? Not in Threshold, because I curbed that shit. Before we actually started streaming Threshold, there's a couple of... First, we tried doing some podcasts. We were kind of curious if we could even make a role-playing game interesting to be streamed, because I've seen so many streams where it's on Roll20 or where it's on like just audio, and it's just people Skype talking, and there's like, it'll be like roll for initiative. Okay, 7. And it's like there's so much dead space. So we were kind of seeing, could we like create a system?
Dead Space is a good game.
What?
I like Dead Space. It's a good game.
Oh. Could we train ourselves essentially to play D&D a little bit different? Mm-hmm. And one of the things that we quickly had to realize is that we can't really talk about the rules or do a bunch of math. We just have to make a call and move on. Mm-hmm. I have played in games before with either people rules lawyering or with people munchkining, and it can be a real problem because it can sort of bog the game down, or if one player is totally optimized and the others aren't, that can be a real frustrating thing. Typically, how I handle it is you just have to accept that that's part of the fun of their game, and either give the other players something to do, or to maybe give play to their weaknesses. Like, if you have a really powerful wizard, throw an anti-magic field at him and watch him squirm. If you have a fighter... Brian looked over at Kevin, who plays Vel, our wizard.
I can already tell they're coming. The anti-magic fields are coming.
Or if you have a player that is just they've maxed their sneak attack dice, then what if there is a creature that has a little bit of time travel, and so like they can't be surprised,
or 1,000 pairs of eyes.
Yeah, or throw a robot eyes on them. Yeah, exactly.
Hashtag Procure Mark III.
Yeah, hashtag Procure Mark III. Oh, Procure is coming. I didn't forget about him. So with the rules lawyering, make sure that your players, and you don't have to do this in a mean way and like totally shut them down, but just remind them that as DM, you're not some entity that they're like paying you to be there. You have to get fun out of the game too. That is like the biggest thing, is you do have a responsibility for your players, and your players, their fun does come first in my mind. But at the same time, remind them that like, hey guys, remember that I'm just here for fun too, and the rules lawyering I think is hurting our fun. And so if we could maybe curb it, really communication, just like anything, is key, and making sure you guys are all on the same page. If being a rules lawyer is really annoying to is really annoying to somebody, then you just have to cut it down. Not cut it down. Sorry, getting distracted. You be nice about it, but just remind people that, hey, this is affecting some people, and ask them really nicely. Because if you ask someone nicely, like, hey, your rules lawyering, I know it might be habitual, but it's hurting the fun of our other players. If maybe when you start to do it, if I'll remind you, hey, you're starting to get a little rules lawyery, if you could maybe just cut it back so we could all try to have a good time. I don't think anyone is going to be like, no, it is my right to rules lawyer. Because if that is their way of having fun and it's hurting everyone else's experience, maybe they would be better off in another group in which long rules discussions are better.
Well, I think Casey is a good example of that.
Sure. Casey's a rules lawyer.
And he's a min-maxer.
And he's a min-maxer because he's a math guy.
He's a math, yeah. So
I have had some trouble. My first ever campaign with Casey, I didn't realize what I was getting into. It was Pathfinder, and he was a paladin, and he had a hammer, and he had a lion shield. And the question that he asked, it was an innocent question. He said, "Hey, Steven, do you think I can smite through my lion shield?" And I said, yeah, your lion shield is an attack action. Like, you should absolutely be able to smite through because it's one of your attacks. Well, then at the level that he was at, he got 3 attacks with his sword, like min-max to destroy everything. And then he got 3 additional attacks at his highest base attack bonus with his lion shield, smiting. So he was like dealing hundreds of damage, and he one-shot a couple of like big bad evil guys that I had thrown up against him, and it was like, what? Like, okay, yeah, fine, okay. And then a dragon shows up there, okay? And then I had them fight another dragon because he just plowed through the sorcerer that I had created for so long. And yeah, so it's a tough thing, but really I would say talk to someone, explain that it's getting frustrating. If it's habitual, otherwise I would just remind everyone, if it's a one-time thing, just be like, I'm the DM, I'm going to make this call now, let's look it up at the end. I do that a lot in Threshold. Sometimes I'm wrong, but for that moment, if we can just have it happen and move on, then we're okay. Let's see, I saw a good... not really familiar with Threshold. Is it podcasted play sessions or what? Hello, Prime Freak. I'm Steven. I am DMing a series called Threshold. It's on YouTube. We're a Let's Play of 5th edition. We're really an ongoing story trying to tell, almost like a TV show, through the medium of Dungeons & Dragons. Yeah. Is really the way that I approach it. So we're playing the game, but we're trying to, it's kind of a looser version of the game because we're trying to get the rules right. I really promise we are. But we're trying to tell a good story and ultimately be entertaining. Our episodes are only an hour, So it's maybe or an hour and a half.
There you go.
They started as an hour and they've slowly expanded to an hour and a half to try to make it easier to watch for maybe someone who doesn't want to sit through 4 hours of people playing a game. That was like my thing. I had never really sat down and watched a video before because you load a YouTube video. It's like our playthrough of this and it's like 4 hour session. I'm like,
my limit's 6 minutes. If a video is more than 6 minutes, I'm like, no, I can move on.
Well, unfortunately, we can't cut episodes of Threshold to 6 minutes. But an hour is the kind of thing that, and now that they're in podcast form, you'll be able to listen to them while you're driving. And I know I do audiobooks and stuff. So that's what Threshold is. Strawberry posted some Connect with D6 Mafia.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, and he explained that already. Oh, well, this is what I get for not being up.
Hey, here's a question for you, Steven.
Okay.
From our friend D.W. Harrison. What was everyone's first time playing D&D like as either player or DM? So how was your first time like?
My first time, I was a friend invited me over. I was in 5th grade, and he was running a game for his older brother, and it was pretty much a solo campaign looking back. And the guy was a wizard. He was very powerful, and he had a party member who was a druid. And they're like, "Steven, do you want to play the druid?" And I said, "Okay, yeah." And I fell in love with being that druid. And I had a wolf companion. And then I finally then we looked at the rule book and we had a copy of, I think, Dragon magazine or something. And in it, there was a special class where you were a druid that doesn't age. And it was I guess that's all druids, but whatever this prestige class was, I was all into it. And I was hooked. So I played games with him where I played a rogue named Cade. And Cade eventually he lost an arm and he had a mechanical one with a grappling hook.
Oh, that's sick.
And he had when my brother would play, my brother was this monkey with 4 stomachs who would eat people, and he had claws that shot out of his arms.
What version was that?
3.5.
No way.
We barely knew any of the rules. We were in 5th grade. So that's where the fun comes from for me. Then I finally started. I couldn't DM because my parents were like, "No, we're pretty sure Dungeons and Dragons is devil worship." Well, they didn't go that far, but my mom was like, I don't know how to address this. And so I think she talked to the kids' parents and she did some research and she finally came to the conclusion that it's not anything scary. It was just play pretend with math.
Yeah, it's no different than playing House or anything.
Yeah, exactly.
As a kid,
imagine if you were playing House as a kid, but to know whether or not you cooked your food well for your pretend husband who just came home.
You rolled your dice.
Yeah, you rolled your dice.
I was always the dog.
And that's exactly the kind of D&D that we played. Is my brother, he wanted to be the dog, or he wanted to be the monkey. One of our longest campaigns was the D20 Modern campaign, where he was this giant, again, another monkey, a giant gorilla person who wore a pimp outfit all the time, and he ripped the blade off of a helicopter and wielded it like a sword. And we played endlessly. He went to the future. That character had a Gundam at one point. As I acquired new rule books. Oh yeah, that's the kind of game that I grew up on. Is just craziness. But anyway, the in-between part between when I actually got the books and when I first got the bug, I invented a game called Story, which we would play on the bus with the other kids. We would all play Story, and one person would be the narrator, and everyone else had a character that they were. And they ranged from one person was a magic-spitting llama, one person was Pajama Sam. And essentially, the narrator told a story, and then at certain points, they'd be like, well, what are you going to do? And Pajama Sam would say, well, I'm going to shine my light at the magic spitting llama to try to blind him. And then it's okay, then you two play rock, paper, scissors, the llama and Pajama Sam, and whoever wins, that is what happens. And so someone would win or someone would lose, and then the goal of the game was to kill everyone else and be the last person. And whoever was the last person got to be the narrator for the next game. And then after that, I wrote my own rules with only D6s that I found around the house, and we called that Ghost Chasers, where we played Mario characters that killed ghosts with glow sticks. Before, I think it was pre-Luigi's Mansion that we were playing this. And then I finally got the books, and then by that point it was okay, and then I had just the player's handbook, and so I would try to run games with just the player's handbook. Oh man.
Oh, wow.
Good times. And then slowly on, I learned more rules and cut back some of the craziness. But I like the craziness. That's why the procurer is a thing.
Yes. My first experience wasn't until college when, now I think back on it, a trope happened, or a thing happened that happens fairly frequently, where if there's a game that people want me to get playing, particularly Kevin, I'm particularly excited about either ice magic or illusion magic. And so when we're playing 3-5, Kevin goes, Brian, you should play 3-5 with us. I'm like, I don't know, Dungeons and Dragons, whatever. And he told me about the Beguiler character who deals almost entirely in illusion magic and like colors and all that kind of stuff.
Uh-huh.
And I was like, oh, that sounds really cool. And cloning oneself and all that kind of thing. So I played that and I fell in love with it. But coincidentally, Threshold is my first game that I ever like played more than just 2 sessions of.
Oh, interesting.
I've played like a bunch of different campaigns, but it's always like 1 or 2 sessions, and then someone gets a job or someone has their schedule changed or whatever, and we never are able to kind of meet back up on a fairly frequent basis. So that's my story. So of course Jamie started off being an ice illusion person.
Yeah, not so much anymore.
No. He had moon powers for an episode.
I'm going to try to go through a lot of these to try to catch up to your chat live. Or actually, I'm going to keep it live so I can see what's going on. And I'll just have Brian go through and answer some questions.
Sure.
Let's see. Some things that I missed. Just going through here. First time playing DM. Great. Co 4 PC and DM, 2 sides of the same coin. I assume that was to my stuff earlier. That's totally right. We're all just people at the table, and we have to remember that. Shadow Fox Alley. Hey, Steven. When I'm doing the Cold Iron Wars, I'm thinking of doing it as my campaigners are going to be like joint generals of a small platoon of troops, and I was wondering what your suggestions are for combat. That's tricky, because at that point, if you're running platoons of troops, it's almost not D&D anymore. You're almost like playing another game. I think that's awesome. I would maybe look at some of the like almost like the rules for Warhammer or Pathfinder in the Ultimate Campaign has some stuff for like large scale combat. That could be really fun if that's what your players are into, to sort of devise some rules systems for like maybe their characters have ways to motivate it. And then maybe in certain situations they'll go down to like a second level. There's maybe like big combat level where they can be directing troops, but then there's also like themselves character level where they're fighting like big fae on the battlefield. That's what I would look. We can talk more about that at length, but I think it would behoove you to sort of look at larger level systems for like figuring out how them as players can control combat within D&D, if it be like charisma checks and stuff, or because when we did Threshold happens pretty much mostly at the person-to-person level, which is why when we get into big combats where there's like tons of stuff going on, I just ignore it and kind of describe it as background noise. But if the movement of the troops is something you want to get into, I would say look at the rules. Yeah, like I said, Pathfinder's Ultimate Campaign has mass combat rules. I'm sure there's a 3.5 book that somewhere has some mass combat rules. And I've never played any like Warhammer or stuff, but maybe a system like that, if that's what your group is looking for, might be a good way to look for inspiration and find a way to adapt the D&D rules into that. I hope that answers your question, Shadow Fox Alley.
Scuba 610, thank you for the wonderful compliment on the table. We did build it. Me and Russ and a little bit of Kevin built it in Russ's garage about a year ago. This is actually the 3rd edition, or the 3rd transformation of this table, which we started off as a piece of plywood on IKEA legs and then turned into a painted piece of plywood on IKEA legs. And then I got tired of that because it was all wobbly, and I took my saw and my Dremel to it and chopped it up and put some other stuff in it, and then Kevin, Russ, and I carved all these figures in it. So thank you for the addition.
Okay. I assume this is still part of what I'm saying. Yeah. Shadow Fox Alley. So how do you balance creatures for the size of the party, or do you just make the enemies' health higher, or do you make them hit harder? Okay. 5th edition is interesting. I'm going to talk just about 5th edition and how monsters are constructed now, in that everything is about how many hit points and and that kind of thing. The way you're asking about party size because we have 5 as opposed to 4. So when you are doing the math, I think it's in the DM's guide or maybe even in the monster manual. It actually talks about what challenge rating it should be for like having 5 players. Usually I bump it up a challenge rating or so, but really for me, I don't, since we're on a fixed XP track, so we level every 8 episodes. Because I don't want to have to be worried about are they getting enough XP, because they would never level with hour-long sessions. I need the story to progress, blah, 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 blah. So I just will throw monsters at them of whatever challenge rating is pretty close, and then they'll do it somehow. I try not to over-destroy them, but I just treat them like a party of 4. Maybe I'll make it a little tiny bit harder. But for the most part, they're heroes. I expect them to win anyway. And if I need a fight to be harder, sometimes I'll just throw the monster a little bit of XP on the side, HP on the side to give it maybe one more round to do some damage. So really, my answer is cheat. Cheat. No one can call you out on it.
Right. Steven, I'm going to take Chixie's advice. I'm going to go on the wiki. I'm going to write a whole regional page about a Munchausen-based area. So that sounds like a Munchausen. Do you know the stories of Baron von Munchausen?
I only am familiar with the Terry Gilliam film.
Oh my goodness!
But mostly the trailer for the Terry Gilliam film.
Yes.
That was on the Monty Python Holy Grail DVD that I watched in a loop.
Baron von Munchausen is a wonderful, almost fairy tale figure from Germany. And he has a lot of fun stories, so I might just do that about him. There's one story where like he shoots a deer. He like is hunting a deer or an elk, and he runs out of bullets. So he takes a cherry pit and puts it in the chamber of the rifle, and then shoots the deer, and it hits him in the head, and the deer runs away. And then he comes back a year later, and the deer had come back and like had cherries sprouting from his antlers.
Oh God!
Just stuff like that.
That's pretty cool. That sounds exactly like the kind of myths and stuff that we can tack on. We can have stuff in the Mammoth Mountains because it already has the kind of Germany feel. Mm-hmm. Like those are the kind of like little details where you can write a story like that and just attribute it to a hero, and then suddenly like there's a whole quest, or maybe there's a whole race of horn beasts with cherries growing out of their antlers that now we have.
Yeah, he rode his horse into a lake and then pulled himself up by his ponytail.
Yes, I do remember that from the movie where he pulls himself up by his ponytail. Scuba 610. After watching the wedding episode, really interested my I don't know why female is in quotes. Your female roommate on.
Don't ask questions.
D&D.
Don't ask questions.
I don't.
Keep moving.
Interested in my female roommate in D&D. Now we play every weekend. I'm so glad. That is again a hope that we're trying to make D&D kind of a little less rulesy, a little more approachable, so that that maybe other people who wouldn't necessarily think to play D&D or think that it's not something for them because of the way that the media portrays it, is really just people in a room having fun, telling a story together, and then sometimes you roll some dice to see how things turn out. And that, I think, is a lot of fun. Yes. Play this D6. Hashtag play this D6.
We're going to request to fire the cannon?
Yeah, that's Venura. That's Pamela.
I didn't read that.
Yeah, so I don't know what this...
That's Pat.
Wait, who?
The play this D6. Those are suggestions for...
Yeah, he started a hashtag to have people...
That's what the cannon is for.
Oh, gotcha.
Okay. Yeah, you guys are confusing me with...
There's suggestions for other games for us to play.
Yes. Absco,
okay.
Absco 4, we apologize that you're bad at dice rolling.
So is Pamela.
So is Pamela.
And she turns out fine.
We find it either helps to cleanse your dice by fire or boiling water. And then
we just got to get a pope to start blessing dice.
Well, we don't need a pope. We need a pope.
I don't know. I figured you can't go higher than the Pope. Maybe like get the Pope and the Dalai Lama in the same room to start blessing dice.
I think Frankie is progressive enough where we can get
Pope Frankie.
Pope Frankie.
Hashtag new Pope. Way better than Pope Classic.
Nazi Pope.
Hey, Pope Classic. Let's see. Comment about... hashtag play this D6 Call of Cthulhu. Yeah, Call of Cthulhu.
Mm-hmm.
I want to... I love Call of Cthulhu. I really want to start... I want to get that big box. The Murder on the Orient Express box that has all the handouts and all that. I really want that.
You get your jollies from handouts, don't you?
The handouts for me is what separates Call of Cthulhu from other games. Because like to have something in your hands that, especially because this one has like an idol, like a full-on idol, like with different pieces. Like to have that contextual thing to be able to like look at a newspaper and read it. Mm-hmm. That way I don't have to like telegraph to you guys what information is important. Like you can stare at this newspaper clipping for like an hour and finally be like, of course, like this is the word we should be looking for, and then you can there's a secret code in there. Like it lets you guys puzzle solve in real time.
Here's a question, Stephen, that perhaps you can help our friend Jay McCook.
Okay. Hey, Jay McCook.
Jay McCook. I can get a group to role play, but when it comes to an actual session, downtime, they often end up disengaged. How do you maintain interests when someone is not directly engaged?
Yeah, I've had problems with that in the past.
The first thing we did was ban cell phones.
Yeah, the first thing I did was ban cell, especially because we're on camera. Like, there's nothing worse than if we were just... Okay, what's going on in combat? Oh, okay. I'm gonna attack him. Oh. Okay, find my sheet. Like, and there's nothing more boring. So that was like the first rule was like no cell phones. Mm-hmm. No cell phones in Threshold. And I have some players that are notoriously like they'll have their laptops there and they'll be like playing games. And for me, it kind of, if people are like, well, why shouldn't we be able to look at the phones? For me, it's a respect thing. As DM, you never don't feel bad about banning cell phones because you don't really get to play with your cell phone as DM because you have to run the game. When you stop paying attention, the world stops. And so I would say ban cell phones and really make sure that all of your players are included and have something to do. Try not to split the party. As soon as you split the party, then that's usually when things get boring for other players who aren't necessarily engaged. And also, the thing that I've found is really helpful in combat is just having the players describe what's happening and let that influence the way that the game is being played. Because when you have, like... I was really bad about this last time, but I'll speak to other examples. If you are able to, in your description, set up a way that, you have distracted them or, you have them in a headlock, then another player can use that in their description. It's sort of a fate thing where you set up advantages in your description for other people to exploit in their actions. And that way, everyone is interested in what's going on. Whereas if you have described, like, cutting them across the chest, then when the next person says, I'm going to take my fist and I'm going to punch it like right in that cut to like really hit him in the weak spot.
Right.
I think that's a way to sort of let the players build off what they're doing rather than have combat be a you take a turn, you take a turn, you take a turn. Because really in combat everything's happening all at once.
Yeah.
Let's see. Here's a great question.
What is it?
Ever think of getting a special in Wizards of the Coast magazine? I would love that on the D&D website. I would love that. Of course, they have their own campaign settings, and there's all these licensing issues and stuff. And the internet, there goes Casey's heavy metal loot. Casey's app is an exception to the cell phone ban. There's licensing things and stuff which sort of prevent us from full on 100%. Like being like, here Wizards, like publish this because they're going to want to take ownership of it. And so for now, I would just prefer to do stuff on our own because I'm kind of Threshold's kind of my baby right now, and I don't want to give it because they have enough campaign settings. They have Eberron, they have all this other stuff. I would love to get a book published for the Threshold world, which is why I want to like build it up and have just a whole. Even not necessarily to make money off of it, but just to have it like basically take the wiki once we have enough in it and go like, here you go. Here's a even just to have the wiki start having stats in it, so the wiki itself is the
book.
Yeah, is the book, so that you can just play a game in a campaign setting for free, which has like lore and stuff that's constantly changing. That's what I'm very excited about. Let's see. Postly, not a bad idea. So, is there another Twitter?
Yeah,
another good Twitter question.
There was a Twitter question. That was basically talking about internal conflicts within the party. And
And
how we deal with that. Yeah,
I saw that one. That's a great one.
Yeah, here we go. It's from Not So Strawberry.
Hey, Strawberry. Yeah, that's a. Wait, is it?
Yeah, and opinions on in-party conflict from a story-driven purpose. Once again, alluding to the Basilisk Rose situation.
I was going to say. Apsco4 also says, how do you deal with a player other than objectives alignments with the main group? Like if you have, so it sounds like you have two lawful goods, a chaotic good, and a chaotic neutral who plays the part. Here's the thing. You're always going to have the situation where you have 4 players who are like, I'm gonna play the lawful good paladin. I'm gonna play the chaotic neutral rogue. I'm gonna play the neutral evil necromancer, and I'm going to play the neutral good cleric. And it's sort of like you have to really stretch and suspend disbelief. Like, tell me how that campaign's going to get started. You're going to go to the inn, and someone's going to be like, hey, I'll pay all of you random people to work together to go kill these goblins in this cave. They're going to be like, yeah, okay, there's some money. Or,
I can give this to my church. Or
something. Exactly. So that's the never-ending sort of struggle, is letting characters play who they want to play, but also have it be cohesive. Because in the real world, those people would never, ever get together unless there were some extraneous circumstances that forced them to work together. And once those circumstances go away, they're probably going to hate each other. Because why is the lawful good paladin going to tolerate the chaotic neutral rogue? Is literally that is the opposite of, or the neutral evil cleric. Those are the opposite of everything that he stands for. Why are they traveling together? So you either have to impose some outward law to say to the paladin and be like, hey, you got to tolerate these guys because your god needs you to do this epic quest, or you let them kill each other, which player versus player combat is always the worst because someone is going to go home upset. Unless everyone is able to handle it maturely, but almost always you become attached to these characters and you don't want to be like, yep, I'm gonna let my rogue die now. Unless you're just done with your rogue, in which case that's a great exit to the story, is just finally having the paladin say enough's enough and cut their head off, and then have to atone for it later. So this is my big thing. It all stems from character creation. You either have to put hard limits on character creation and then let the campaign limits be softer, or you let players make whatever they want and then really have to impose and railroad them to get them to work together in the game. I would much rather tell my players ahead of time, no, you got to be a good alignment, and you have to be from this town, and you have to come up with a reason why you're these things, and choose from these races. Clarion originally was a half-elf. And I said, Clarion, I'm going to have you be human because your half-elfness is probably just for the charisma bonus. Not that there's anything wrong with that. But in this case, I said, I want to explore what it means to be a half-elf. And if we have 2 half-elves, suddenly the half-elfness is no longer feels special. So I asked him if he would be willing to change to a human. And he said, yeah, that's fine. And it has worked out a lot better. If you place the hard limits on the character creation standpoint by like saying, this civilization is mostly humans, there might be some elves and half elves, but there's certainly no dragonborn because I hate dragonborn. If I put the limits on them on that end, then it makes the game a lot easier because then we don't have this varying group of people who it would make no sense for them to hang out. We actually have a group of people that you could realistically see their characters being friends. Like, especially if they have certain goals, my favorite thing to do is to say, who wants to be family members? That's the best thing you can do in a game is if you have two players, especially that are particularly close, say, hey, what if your two characters were brothers? Because then it creates this awesome dynamic where, if you have a party of 4 and 2 of them are brothers, at least 2 of them are going to always stick together, which means that the other 2 people, like their votes aren't necessarily lessened, but for the most part, the brothers are going to agree or at least like learn to tolerate each other. So I would say put the limits on the hard limits on the front end. If you're already midway through a campaign, then maybe like sit your players down or even in character and be like, why are you guys traveling together? And have them find the common ground that way, because that'll sort of dictate how you have to handle the problem. And then it'll be a lot easier once they maybe start thinking about it in character. Why are we traveling together? And if they're say like, well, really, we have no reason to because we all want to play the game, then maybe you approach them and be like, hey, so would you guys maybe consider changing these? And your specific thing, you have your alignment system. I see Zaxel is saying he has a homebrew alignment system. Yeah, that's what I do is I throw out the alignment system. I had people leave it blank on their sheets because it just creates lazy role playing. Rather than the paladin actually having a code that he has to actually put out. Because maybe like the rogue is perfectly fine to steal because that's not necessarily part of his code. Or maybe like the stealing is part of his code, so the rogue can do whatever he wants so long as he doesn't steal in front of the paladin. Like, once you throw out the alignment system, because no one is really an actual alignment. And in 5th edition, there's no longer any magic that is like specifically alignment based. I always loved overanalyzing the idea, like in 3.5, alignment is a physical thing that you can look at when you cast a spell. And it's like, if you're evil. How can anyone be evil unless they're super evil?
Right.
Because you can go to a cleric and be like, am I evil? Yep, you're evil. You're going to go to the 9 hells when you die, a place that we can physically travel to and describe. It's not like when you have people that are able to like actually perceive your morality, there isn't any ethics because you can just go, you're evil, you're gonna go to hell. Hell is a bad place that we can like empirically prove is a bad place. So I just throw the alignment system out, and 5th edition makes it so easy to throw it out.
Well, and I can tell you as a player, it makes it a lot easier if you take your character from where, and then you make a backstory for them. The more detailed and diverse your backstory is, the more your decisions in the future are going to be. So, like having your alignment be your motivating factor is one thing. But if Jamie's going to make a decision, it's going to be based on Jamie's interactions and his experiences. So that's what he does.
Oh, here we go. Okay. So in the campaign that we're talking about, the bard wanted to give the big bad evil guy challenging 10 plus frost giant spellcaster. Okay, awesome. I love giants. I need to use them more. His magical scepter bag so he could dominate the neighboring lands. He was promised a general slot in his military, which sparked a PvP session for a few rounds of combat. Here's how I would approach that situation. If any of you guys want to jump in. Here's how I would approach it. I would say, hey, your bard is looking like he wants to join with the big bad evil guy. That's great. How about you give him back his scepter? I'll take your character sheet. The party can now fight him. I'll run your character now. So that way we don't have any conflict of interest, and you can roll up a new one. If that's really what your character wants to do is join the evil guy, then he should really be run by the dungeon master. Or if the party says that sounds like a much more interesting story, maybe they can all roll new characters and go with that situation. Chances are they're not going to want to give up their characters unless it sounds like a really awesome thing to do, to like go be generals in this Frost Giants army. But I would say, yeah, if you want to join up with this guy, then that's great. We'll have this sort of be the end of your control of the character. I will play it now because I play the bad guys, and you can roll up a new good guy. Because really that should be the way it is, unless you're running an evil campaign. But, you know, I play the antagonists. You can roll up a new protagonist. That's a better way to say it. That would be my suggestion. Rather than having it be PvP, eliminate the PvP as an option. Say, if it's going to come to the point where it's going to fight, I'm going to determine who's the protagonist and who's the antagonist, and I'm going to take control of the antagonist. And that way the party will, like, not want to get into PvP if you're going to take their character away, essentially. And it's kind of a heavy-handed thing to do, but at the same time it makes narrative sense in the story that you're trying to tell. You know, that's a big plot twist, in which case then you as the DM can now use the twist. And then that bard can be an excellent villain down the line, where now the party has to fight their old friend, and maybe at that point he decides, you talk with that player ahead of time and be like, yeah, maybe he wants to turn back and be good at that point. He can betray the big bad evil guy, and then the player gets their character back, maybe leveled up in a new way, and it's an awesome moment of redemption, which is, I think, the most powerful element in storytelling. And, you know, it'll be legendary where their character went away for a while and then at an important moment came back, rather than a moment where you're just tearing your hair out because the party's all fighting each other. Yeah, thankfully no one died.
All right. I'm going to tag out.
Tag out!
Tag out!
Woo! Okay. Thanks, Brian. Everyone say bye, Brian.
Bye,
Brian. Who wants to jump in?
I broke it.
What if the...
I broke it.
What if the whole table, like the whole leg was one that...
Yeah.
Crack!
Well, it is from IKEA.
And yeah. No. It was replaced from IKEA.
Well, then it would be time for Mark III table. Or Mark IV
Yeah.
table. This is Mark III table.
Okay.
I play the bad guys. I love this that's a great thing to say. Or if you want to, if your guys are evil, you say I play the antagonist, because your bad guys could be good guys in a way.
Oh yeah. Okay. Let's see.
Let's see. Here we go. Vice Rosewater. Hello, I'm a longtime player, but pretty new at DMing. I set out a campaign, and I have the Mage Guild that will give the new missions and aid them with the overall campaign. But after hinting at this guild will help or have information for them, and flat out telling them in game and out of game, telling them the guild is important. My players say there's no incentive for them to go to the guild. How do I get them to go to the guild? You have to give them an incentive. I know that sounds really kind of silly and obvious, but it is important to note that you have to figure out what your players' goals are and what their characters' goals are. I call this system of incentivizing players to do what you want, it's an important element of what I call the weave, which is where you take these individual plot threads and you kind of turn them into a tapestry. Like, let's talk about the 50 Shades of Grey, our season 1 finale of Threshold. That is an example of me basically setting up the weave for episodes and episodes, where I needed them to go to Marenton, really so I could get them to discover the elven goddess in the stone. So how do I do that? Well, it has to be Marenton, because that's where the stone is, but that'll get Christine there. And then how do I get Rasper there? I put Garay there. Of course, by that point, there were enough plot threads together and the party was unified enough that they'd be all willing to go down there. But
yeah, I think it's great. Like the way that you make the payoffs also set up, because like that felt like a big culmination and stuff, and really what you were doing was just setting up for more stuff down the line. But which I guess is the weaving portion of it. Also, hi everybody. I haven't said hi yet.
It's all of the DMing is kind of all about, and storytelling I think is all about setups and payoffs. Everything that you set up should be a payoff, because that's what makes it satisfying. And in order to pay something off and have it be satisfying, you have to properly set it up. In your case, you have this mage guild. So I don't really know why the mage guild's important, but I'm going to assume that they have something that your players are going to need when you later on to maybe conquer something later on. I think that maybe the best thing to do is to initially ignore it and just kind of place that the mage guild is there. And then when the thing comes that they're going to need the mage guild's help for, let it kick their ass. And maybe not kill them outright, but show them that you need help for this. And then when they go, well, how do we do this? Then hopefully if you've set up the mage guild properly, then they're going to want to go and do this. Or let's say that they want to go on a totally other adventure thread. That's fine. Let them do that. But then put a roadblock in their way that maybe someone isn't going to help them until they take care of this problem, which they can only get help from the mage guild. Like, it's a really tough manipulation game because you don't want to railroad them into doing this quest, but figure out what the players want and what their characters want to figure out how to get the mage guild to be important. Maybe whatever help it is, could it be, instead of a mage guild, could it be like a huntsman league? Or could it be like just one crazy guy out in the woods? Or maybe a god that comes down and tells them this? If it's the source that's important, you need to make sure that it's a source that your players are going to want to go to for help. Let's see if you've responded while I'm talking. No. So I hope, Vice Rosewater, that's helpful. Really talk to them, figure out, even just ask them outright, what kind of incentive would I need to dangle in front of you guys in order to get you to go there? Especially if these are new players or you don't exactly know what makes them tick. Eventually, like, I know exactly how to get certain players that I play with, how to get them interested in things. I know Rasper wants gold. I know Vel wants new information. Christine will do something for honor, or if it's something to help build her family. Clarion is tough to motivate because he just has less threads going, but Clarion is a romantic, so I can bait him with love. You have to know, like, what is the bait for the characters, and sometimes you just have to ask them, like, what do you want? Jamie, of course, has a patron, so I have to bait him either with the patron that he's currently working for or for the patron that he wants to be working for. So yeah, let's see. How much prep should a DM do before a game session? It depends on your session. Sometimes I will do no prep, and I'll literally sit down at the table and go, guys, I have nothing prepped for this session. But in reality, I know where I need the story to go, and I just look for opportunities to get them there. This session that'll release on Monday, Town Time Not Edition, was an example of I had nothing prepped. But I did know that I had certain plot threads that I had to set up for next time. So in whatever they were doing, I set those up, and so then starting next episode, I can pay them off. Actually, the next few episodes, there were a lot of setups in that episode, even though it didn't really feel like it, because I knew where I needed to go to the next step, so I could work with this step. I would definitely say have any monsters you have ready, have any NPCs that you know are going to come up named, have a general idea of what you want to happen in this session, and also have certain things just in your back pocket, like that you can maybe just pull out in an emergency, like a emergency adventure or an emergency dungeon.
Yeah, I've heard of some DMs keeping just like a deck of random encounters and stuff that they can just throw at situations if they need them and stuff, which I always thought was kind of a neat idea.
If you like it, if you have a party that loves encounters, have a random encounter table ready for a forest. If if they blow through something a little faster than expected. It really just depends on how much if you know everything that is pretty much going to happen without railroading them. If you just sort of know, like, we are entering this dungeon, I have the dungeon prepped, so I know everything that's going to happen. That's great. If you don't know they're going to enter the dungeon, don't prep the dungeon until you know they're already going to enter it. Otherwise, if they decide, we don't want to go to the dungeon, you haven't wasted your time and you don't feel like you need to go, well, we're going to put you in the dungeon now. I started season 2 without knowing where the story was going to go. I had an idea of stuff I wanted to happen, but I wanted to wait until we got a couple episodes in to, like, really feel out what is going on. And then, of course, the story wrote itself. And then it was like, oh my God, this is what needs to happen. And I'm excited about every single episode coming up in season 2. Like, there are certain last time there were certain episodes I was excited about, but every episode of this one is like, oh my God, and then this happens. Oh yeah, and then the next one is this happens. So I'm very thrilled for this, but it's because I didn't do my prep work until I saw the direction, and it'll write itself. Your players have their own narratives and expectations. Figure out and kind of get a feel. You don't have to ask them, but you can kind of get a feel for what their expectations are, and then it's going to be so much easier for you to write your story. Because if, like, the first session, you have this whole campaign planned out, and then when the one character says, like, I need to find my father, like, then you go, oh my God, like, let's go find his father. And if you wait until that awesome plot hook happens, if all the other characters are just as excited about finding his father, well, then you know how to motivate them because they've written it for you. Then you just have to figure out how do we find their father and the awesome weaves that can take. So it's a variable amount. Let's see. DWD Harrison. How do you guys feel about some of the variant rules in the Dungeon Master's Guide? The plot points rule. That sounds like a very Fate thing to do. I like Fate a lot. I sort of just have that as a non-declared rule. They don't have like points or anything to spend. But if someone wants to declare something about the world, or if someone wants to write an article, you guys have plot points technically too. If you want to write something on the wiki that I like, hell yes, I'll include it. Because it's at its most fun. D&D is at its most fun when it is a collaborative story, because we are together creating something that one person never could. Some of the interesting things that happen in these games that we play are so much better than some of the stuff that we see up on the big screen or in books and stuff. And sometimes not as much, but some of them are just so amazing because it's multiple people working together to create something that's real.
Yeah, arriving at stuff like that organically there's just like a special kind of magic in that. I don't even.
If you think your party would like the plot points, I say give it a try. The worst case scenario is you can say, guys, give me your plot points back. Like, this is stupid. That's really the worst case scenario. I have played Fate. I do like the Fate point system because it lets you guys declare stuff about the world and have a currency for it, so one person doesn't declare a lot. But in Threshold, I think we find that everyone pretty much is declaring their own stuff, and we have enough stuff starting to pop up on the wiki that that I don't really feel the need to introduce them. Because I would also forget to give them out because I got enough going on. That's why I can't do inspiration points and stuff. I think Clarion still has one inspiration.
That's true. I think we've all forgotten about that now.
Yeah. Actually, I would love to start a system where you guys give out the inspiration points, except we have a delay because we try to film ahead of time just in case we have to skip a week or something.
But yeah, I know when we first started out, at least one commenter came up and said that, like, started nominating players for inspiration, and it was kind of cool. But it's like there's so much else going on that I think it just sort of fell by the wayside. And I never feel like as a player that we really need the inspiration. It's kind of cool, but it's not like a motivating factor for me or anything.
Right. Going down plot points. Mm-hmm. Okay. Little update from AppSco 4. The 3 good characters we chose stand against him. Giant King no longer trusted the bards and see effectively CC'd our entire party. A lot of natural ones. Okay. You broke concentration and we barely... Okay. Well, cool. That's great. It sounds like you guys found a way to, within it... it sounds like your DM actually found a way to have the Giant King not trust the bard. That's another great way to do it, is like, why are these villains always necessarily so willing to like let the people but I think we've covered that. Let's see.
AppSco had an interesting question a little bit up here. They were talking about power gaming, and it is just this reminded me of sort of our dungeon crawl audio thing that we released. Is it really power gaming if someone just optimizes their character intelligently and then is not a disruptive force in the game, but is just really well optimized? And that just sort of reminded me of like, the conversation we had with Casey at the end of that episode was really interesting.
At the end of the Medusa.
Yeah, the lead up to that, the audio only thing that we did for the bulk of the dungeon.
Okay, so it's essentially the question of how to handle someone who is optimized but isn't necessarily bad.
Yeah, it was. There was a whole thread. There was some discussion about power gaming and just how to handle it and how disruptive it is. And
I think that the best way, if you have one power gamer at the table or something, I think that the best thing to look to is literature. You look at Homer's Iliad or the movie Troy. And Achilles is just better than everyone else. And everyone knows it. Gross.
Yep.
Achilles is better than everyone else, and everyone knows it. And that just becomes part of how people role play and look at Achilles. Like, if you have a power gamer who, like, destroys people, maybe just have the townspeople start going to them directly and be like, hey, you need to go fight this dragon. And he's like, oh, no, I'm not powerful enough for that. And they're like, no, you're the best. You're the hero. You got to do it. Like, if they're going to be more powerful and, like, kill every monster themselves, cutting the head off in one hit, people are going to take notice of that. And that could be a really interesting story thing where if you do have one power gamer who's better than everyone else, what does that mean for the people around them?
It's kind of funny because I feel like that's almost like a little metagaming trap too. Because like, yeah, the player knows that they're not high enough level to fight a dragon.
Yeah, absolutely.
But if their character has decapitated everything in one hit that they've ever run into in their life, who's
why
to say they
gonna
won't?
Why are they not going to fight a dragon if they are? And then you roast the character, and then maybe their next character won't be, or you don't roast them, and maybe they do kill the dragon, or maybe they have a humility moment where they have to run away, and then maybe the character is going to hold back a little bit. Like, again, this is assuming that this character is going to RP at all and not just flat out refuse. But that is an interesting story way to handle it, is accept the fact. It's sort of like, again, back to improv. It's a yes and thing. Like, yes, you are better than everyone else, and people notice, and they're going to come to you with their problems rather than someone else because you know how to do it.
Mm-hmm.
I see the power gaming.
Yeah, there was some discussion about 10-foot poles. I know that you love those.
Yes, the 10-foot pole is my favorite. My favorite magical item is the immovable rod, and my favorite item is the 10-foot pole, because the 10-foot pole is the thing that sounds so stupid and useless, but I guarantee you everyone at least once in their game has pulled out the 10-foot pole, and like some crafty asshole is like, and I solved all of our problems with the 10-foot pole. So whenever I build bards, Bard is my favorite class. I haven't really looked at him too much in Player's Handbook, but I loved Bard in 3.5 because they just kind of get a little bit of everything, and you can be like, oh, yep, I pulled out my 10-foot pole and I fixed the problem. 10-foot pole, like, and the 10-foot pole rewards you for being smart. Mm-hmm. And the fact that you have written 10-foot pole is not like, oh, this probably would be great if we had a stick. I search for a stick. It's way more satisfying when it's like, I prepared for this. I pull out my 10-foot collapsible pole.
I like the not collapsible version, where just the absurdity that you've been carrying around this 10-piece wooden rod with you. Anyway.
And the immovable rod is my favorite for similar reasons, because it's immensely powerful magic.
Yeah, I'm like kind of intimidated by it now that you've given us one in the campaign.
Oh, it's so good. It's so good.
Like the potential is sort of humbling what you can do with that thing.
Yeah, it's...
Especially when Josh goes off on his crazy things about how you could attach a barrel full of gunpowder to it and make a cannon. And
yes, well, we won't get into...
we don't need to touch on that.
Yeah. Good players use a 10-foot pole. Better players put the halfling on the pole in addition to him having his own.
Oh my god. We need a halfling in the party.
Yes, I haven't done much with halflings and not gnomes. Yeah. Let's see.
Shadow Fox Alley has a pretty good question.
Oh, didn't.
How do you keep people balanced in your campaign?
The players balance?
Oh, here it is. So how do you keep people balanced in your campaign so it's not someone doing all the fighting and someone doing all the talking while still giving the characters the full use of creating the character?
why is it necessarily bad if someone does all the fighting and someone does all the talking? I mean, if it's like 100% fighting and 100% talking, you're playing two different games. But like, I think that even in real life, we recognize that like certain people are better at certain things than others. Like, I know in certain situations, I'll let someone who knows more about something do the talking, and maybe I'll just interject to say a few things, or I know for a fact that I won't climb to the top of the truss that all the theater lights are on because I'm not as good of a climber as some of my other friends.
Yeah, he actually had a continuation on it too. He said in a game he played, the DM physically split them up in different rooms with all their characters split up. The not knowing drove them crazy until a big event forced them back together. Oh, that was more of a split the party kind of. That actually wasn't. I got confused by colors. That wasn't actually.
Oh goodness, there's all kinds of.
Yeah.
Okay. I answered this question about the forest. I'm gonna go to Twitter here for a minute.
Go for it.
What do Andreas H. Opsvik asks, what do you like about pre-published adventures and what is your favorite? So far, I like that pre-published adventures sort of they can let you jump into a world that you haven't done necessarily and have they do the setups and payoffs for you. So I really liked Curse of the Crimson Throne for Pathfinder. But I skipped book 4, and then we did book 5, which was a huge dungeon, and then I just finished out the end in one big combat. I don't like that a lot of the time published adventures because it is a game, there'll be like huge dungeons that like take months to complete, and you sort of lose the story and you lose interest. I don't like that pre-published adventures kind of have a tendency to make people want to railroad you and sort of correct you rather than letting you go off on whatever. In Curse of the Crimson Throne, and a lot of our problems, they didn't have enough time. They needed to confront the queen now, but they wanted to build all these magic items. So one of our wizard actually traveled back in time to live out his life for like 2 years in a different city, in the city of Absalom. And it was Casey, actually, who played the wizard. And he fell in love during that time, and he got married. And we played a whole session, like, just him traveling through time. But some of the best things that came out of that campaign were the stuff that we ended up just homebrewing ourselves. So, here's another question, again, by Andreas. Who is our Bold Players and DM inspirations? Ooh. A lot of, you can kind of see what I'm into depending on what's going on in Threshold. Like, you can tell when I started watching Avatar The Last Airbender because right around then we get Noddish Flesh Sears. You can see that I like a lot of Game of Thrones because I have the house system and kind of the political machinations happening. My favorite movie is Lawrence of Arabia, so I'm really happy to be over in Syraxis. Nice. There's all kinds of influences that just kind of swirl around. I don't have any big like DM influences. One more question from Twitter. What are my opinions on hex grid maps? I go back and forth. Casey turned me on to the hex grid map, but there is something about squares that makes it easier. The game is sort of designed for squares, and a lot of the miniatures fit better in squares, but it is a lot harder to draw in squares. I say either one is fine. It's whatever the situation calls for, because a lot of the time I don't like using maps at all. I think that certainly if like distance and movement speed are really important to you, I think hexes are going to be easier because they solve the diagonal problem. But I know in 5th edition they just remove the diagonal problem even though it isn't necessarily realistic. So that's sort of my thoughts there.
If you're curious, I can't really speak for the other players, but the question about inspiration, I just like manic wizards. I'm
so glad Vel's manic stuck. Because I know, like, we were, like, especially in the alternate, we did 2 test episodes of Threshold that I don't know if they'll ever see the light of day because
if I have my way, they won't.
Because we were still, like, getting the feel for how to play in this a way to get the to make it entertaining again to watch. But we did a couple of test episodes that we filmed and shot, and one of them we kept the continuity in, but one of them was just, the energy was so low and it was so bad that we ended up striking it from existence and retconning it in the next.
It's the darkest.
In the next session.
It's the darkest possible threshold.
We call it the ranch timeline. Yes. So you like Manic Wizards?
If anybody plays Magic, I very much like the Is It Guild in Ravnica. That's where I just blue red. Anyway.
Skill checks for player versus player. It's been a big discussion. I personally think that in 5th edition, the contest system lends itself pretty naturally to be able to have skill checks player versus player. It kind of is PvP a little bit. If you're trying to pick the pocket of the paladin, then, I mean, maybe let the rogue have his day and pick the pocket, but I would certainly remember, again, you can kind of slap his hand a little bit by, not only does the paladin get to notice if he's being pickpocketed, but the town square that they're in the center of has a lot of passerbys who might feel that this random thief is picking that they've never met before, is picking the pocket of this holy champion of good. They might notice and step in to say something. Player versus player checks I think are great so long as it's not a PvP situation. If it's like determining whether or not, who wins an arm wrestling contest, I think that's fine because naturally someone is gonna win or not. But really, you kind of want to avoid conflict with your players. You want them to work together. But I think that the contests provide a pretty good way to essentially just have roll-offs with a little bit of pluses and minuses. Let's see. Player-on-player skill checks are taboo. If you can't actually convince them to do something or other. Oh, we're talking about this. We're talking about like bluffing. This is the whole player agency versus verisimilitude problem.
Oh, this comes up quite a bit, actually.
So I'm glad I read a little bit further down. A great Patron backer bonus for the 2 unreleased episodes.
Yeah,
no,
I feel like the reward is that you don't have to see those episodes.
You have to watch them.
We'll make you watch them unless you back us.
Player agency versus verisimilitude. So if I'm the Bard Elysian, who is renowned for his beguiling words and is said to have outwitted gods and monsters. If he is in a room with a fighter who doesn't want to go through the door, can I trick him into going through the door with my beguiling words? And if that is another player, like, can I trick Kevin's Vel into walking through a door?
Probably pretty easily, yeah.
Well,
anyway.
Can I trick Rasper into going through a door? That might be a little tougher because he's got a pretty decent wisdom score.
Yeah, that's true.
It's a fine line because if part of your character description is that you are super charismatic and that's part of your thing to be beguiling and to be convincing, then it would be within the verisimilitude of your world to say, yeah, your character can do that, even when you as a player might not. But by doing that, you're taking away the agency of another player and saying, you have to do what he says because he put points into charisma. We ran into this problem in one of our podcasts when we were, again, workshopping Threshold. We were actually playing Fate, and we had a situation where one character basically needed to lie to another character to tell them, basically to make them do something that they wanted to. And it got really frustrating because in several games in a row this was happening where one of my players was, Kevin was the victim of this. One of my players was basically saying, you're going to do this now because of the way that I've set my character up. And
I was with a victim and I did it to another player. So it was just bad in that game.
So It is such a tough line. I personally would say that player agency, it needs to be more important. If your characters disagree to the point where one of them needs to make a skill check to try to convince another player or his character to do something, I would say no.
I feel like it's almost like you need to have, like, the two players need to have an out of character discussion to decide how they want this. Like, they need to actually talk about story for a second and be like, okay, how do we want this story moment to go?
Yeah.
Like, and of course, then you have to have two players who are mature enough to have that conversation.
It is a meta conversation, or just have players that know, like, if your character is tricking me, to recognize as a player, okay, I'm fine with getting duped. We don't need to do a dice roll. I'll allow my character to be duped for the sake of the story and for the sake of time, because you can't win. You can't win at D&D. I see some discussion. So that's tricky. I would say maintain player agency, but it's better to have a meta conversation and figure out where we can all go. What's a point that we can all be happy and move forward, than to sit there and argue in character about two things that are never going to happen. I see. I'll make a rules call on the tiny hut. I believe that's the dome one, where it's the dome.
Yeah, the tiny hut spell. Yeah,
the dome is not meant to be a dome that you set up and then you hide behind and shoot out of. It's designed to be a resting place where you can rest in the forest and not be eaten by bears. I don't know. I'd have to read the exact rules, but for me, if it's the spell that I remember correctly, I would say that you're kind of being a little min-maxy if you're gonna fight through the walls of this thing. Yeah. Maybe wait until you have the spell that's actually designed for you to fight out of it.
As someone who likes to play spellcasters a lot, I like to believe that intention behind spells has a lot and of course it depends on your magic system and everything, but I feel like it really helps in these situations to look at the intention of the person who wrote that spell, because they obviously didn't intend for it to be like an invincible fortress that you can shoot out of. Like Steven said, it was the guy who made that spell in lore made it so you could sleep in the woods without being eaten by bears.
Yeah, so there are other spells that do that same thing, that create an orb for you to fight out of. That's not personally what I think is one of them.
That's like using the rope trick to get through everything. Don't use the rope trick to get through everything.
Edwin says that they've used inspiration in these situations for player A to do something player B doesn't want them to do. That's actually a great system. Fate does that a little bit with the fate points, where like if you're going to do something to another player, you have to give them one of your fate points. Mm-hmm. I think that's a great system, is basically saying, hey, if you do this for me, I'll give you, you can't necessarily bribe them in character, you can bribe them with out of character points, like saying, hey, let me give you this plot point or this fate point. If you do this for me, then when the time comes around, I'll do something for you. I think that's a great way to do it.
It's a great give and take. It means that I'll give you this moment, and now you've given me basically currency that will buy me a moment later. It's very nice.
Exactly. Let's see. We're kind of coming to the end. Five more minutes. I'm actually going to go till 5:05 because there's a little bit of a delay here, like 30 seconds or so. So, any sort of last questions before we wrap this up? Because my mouth is getting dry and I have to go to the bathroom.
I guess I have to unshackle you from the table.
Yeah, please. I just live down here. Okay, here we go. As Wheels, I have a player who doesn't want to come up with any background for his bard. He wants me to do it for him. Is this something I should do, or just leave his background a mystery and move forward? I want to know why he doesn't want to come up with any background for his bard. That to me seems kind of weird. Why do you? If maybe he just wants to play the rules. I would definitely say that it's going to be hard for you to motivate him if his character doesn't have a background. I would say if you don't want to come up with a background, I will come up with one for you, and you probably won't be happy with it. Background bonus is another way to do it, to give like someone bonuses for doing it. I think that the benefit to having a backstory should be that you have plots that are gonna be good for your character, and that I definitely in Threshold rewarded. You can tell when Clarion comes up. I had this problem with Clarion. You can tell when he comes up with his backstory because it happens in. It actually, I gave him one. He didn't. He wasn't reluctant to come up with his backstory, but he was just not.
He was dragging his feet a little bit on the backstory.
He wasn't sure what he wanted to do, and so I approached him and I said, "Would you like to be a werewolf? I want you to be a werewolf." And he was like, "Yeah, okay, I guess." And that's sort of when you can see that the character starts to take off. And then a few episodes after that, you can see that there's hints. Actually, the Wendigo is when I first started dropping hints about Casey's backstory with these Nottish merchants.
Yeah.
So that's kind of the point where you can see when Clarion gets his backstory, because he actually gets he actually gets plot hooks that'll motivate him, because otherwise you can see that all the other characters have a bit more story than Clarion does, because by the time that we get his together, the ball's already rolling. Of course, then we start now with Clarion definitely has a great backstory and is actually one of the driving forces now. So you can certainly look for that as a way to motivate your players to make a backstory, is by having the plot of the story have to do with their character's backstory.
Yeah, another thing sort of touched on is make sure tell them that they don't get a background bonus. That's a good point. If you're playing 5th edition, there's actually like mechanics in the game that help you build at least a skeletal backstory. You can there's literally a list of backstories, and you can just choose them, and they give you skill points and stuff. So, I mean, if nothing else, you could at least show him the list and get a vague idea and fill in some more blanks later.
I'm going to go through a bunch of these real fast. How would I, just catching the end, hey, Cat of Fun, we'll have the whole thing on YouTube so you can watch it and see the backstep. But I'll answer this question. How do you construct a story with little or no human towns or settlements? That sounds awesome. Here's what I would do. Be the biggest asshole in the world with carrying capacity, with food, with water, with weight, and with equipment. Set them in the middle of the desert and really not have enemies be the thing that are going to kill them. Like, if you run into bandits, think like Mad Max Road Warrior, where they're like standing around. The story is your survival. Maybe you're crossing a desert, or maybe there's a famed like city on the other end of the desert and you have to cross it. And like their reward isn't gold or shops they can buy or sell things at. It is finding a cache of treasure or an oasis. Like, that sounds like a badass campaign where every like gritty detail is meticulously noted, so that you have to like a reward is finding the water, or you have to go fight these bandits because they have water, or people are trying to attack you because you have water. Like, that's what I would do without towns or settlements.
That sounds great. I'm so glad that there's towns and settlements in Threshold.
Yeah. That's not the campaign that I'm running in Threshold, but I would have a lot of fun. You just got to make sure your players are down for that.
Yeah.
Stream a meat grinder one time. I don't know if by meat grinder you mean a game where a lot of guys get killed. I want to do Call of Cthulhu, because as I already tweeted, I have my death wall, and I love killing people in Call of Cthulhu.
And we love being killed by you in Call of Cthulhu.
I have a player, Vice Rosewater, as a player who makes all of his characters drug dealers. You're a little fed up. I would first ask him why he wants to have all of his characters be drug dealers. If that's just something that he thinks is fun, perhaps then you can craft a subplot that involves him being a drug dealer. I had my brother at one point played his very first character was Bafflor Bruntless, the dwarf, and Bafflor started out as a ranger and then became a fighter for a while, and then as we remade him multiple times, he ended up being a druid with 4 arms and an elephant trunk. But he and his barbarian partner owned a floating city called Sir Boozalatzelsburg, which was a giant brewery that was the size of a town and floated on the back of the giant zeppelins. Pre-Bioshock, thank you very much. So a lot of their quests had to do with like securing special materials for their brewing, or doing other important things for their brewing. Like maybe figure out a way to play to his strength and to wrap that into their. Maybe he needs to take out rival drug dealers, or perhaps and the rival drug dealers are the bad guys. If he wants to make money by selling the drugs, if that's it with a gold thing, then just give him a drug dealing check and just let him, when he's in town, roll it and give him a certain number of gold pieces depending on how good it is, and then have him make a second check to see whether or not he gets thrown in jail for it.
Well, apparently he is a stoner, and that's why he wants to be a drug dealer. So.
Yeah, that's then he probably just thinks it's funny, and maybe say like, hey, maybe just talk to him and say like, hey, people don't find this funny. It's not really fun. Could you maybe make a character that's not a drug dealer? I don't know why, if he's a stoner, he would want to be a drug dealer in this game. That seems a little too much like art imitating life.
Exactly. We probably have time for like one more question here.
Okay. I see. Yeah, some. Do
you have anything?
Paladins. He was a paladin and lost it because of drug dealing. Weird. Drug dealing paladin. Favorite non-core books and webs. Oh, okay. Non-core books. I loved the. This is Wilbur's question. I love the Eberron campaign setting when it first came out. I'm not too big of a fan of Warforged right now. Warforged and Dragonborn can go away because dragons need to be scary, and if anyone can just be a dragon at first level, that is dumb. You need to withhold the dragons so when you use them at opportune moments, they feel the wonder.
Or you do the thing Casey did, and you play a Dragonborn who died and put his soul into a Warforged.
And you know what I did? I played his character another time, and I turned it into Clunky, a mindless killing robot. Because that is what Warforged are. They are mindless robots. I'm just looking at our collection of books. The Epic Level Handbook, I guess, is non-core. I loved that for 3.5. I loved the D20 Modern. I absolutely loved, which isn't core. I'm loving Fate. I have a rule set for Fate, which is Mean Girls, the RPG, and I really want to run that. Maybe I'll see if anyone will play that with me tonight.
I'll play that with you tonight, Steven.
But I really want to do that. How to make an encounter that is achievable for the characters to complete, but push them to run away. Yes, that's a hard thing to do. Is to make, because characters assume that they can overcome a situation. How do you get them to the point where they want to run away? I had that problem when I was fighting in Eisenschmied. They were supposed to lose some of the Cold Iron War battles and be pushed back repeatedly, but I was kind of trying to spin it that way, and they were killing the monsters. And Casey, in the afterwards, I'll never forget, I was like, you guys were supposed to lose that and go back, and Casey goes, yeah, I could see that you were trying to do that, but I was like, no, I'm pretty sure we're winning here. So maybe set up a way to make them lose, but lose very slowly, and then maybe as you whittle them down, start to make it look more and more unwinnable. And worst case scenario, just say like, hey guys, running is always an option, because it is a game and we are telling a story, and just reminding them that they can run away and maybe they should run away is okay. It's okay to be a little bit meta. That's why he's one of the fates in Threshold. Nera, story, Dika, which is chance, and meta, which is the unknowable elder god. It might help that's not a question. For such a desert campaign, pick up the 3X Sandstorm book. Oh, okay. Yeah. The 3 edition. I'm sure there's a good Sandstorm book with lots of desert stuff. Drugs are bad. Okay. Blah, 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 blah. Any more? Do you guys see any more questions? Do you guys all live near each other and hang out outside of work? Yeah, we do.
Yeah, like pretty much all the time.
Pretty much all the time. We all live pretty close. Actually, Josh, Kevin, and I didn't know each other, but we grew up in the same town. And my parents and Kevin's parents live across the street from each other.
Still do.
But we didn't, still do, but didn't actually hang out until we moved across state lines.
Yeah, it took us moving away and not living next to each other for us to hang out.
And Josh lived on the same street down the corner. We didn't lose it. It looks like people recognize that it's time to wrap it up. Thank you guys for all the questions. I would love to do another one of these with maybe our players as well in the future. be sure to watch our videos, tweet at us. We're really trying to, both with the wiki and with the YouTube, just build sort of a community of not just role playing games, not just Dungeons and Dragons, but so just sort of a larger group of people. And I love hearing from you guys. I will have our Twitter handles in the. And I see. Thank you so much, Strawberry, for helping us out with.
Dang,
you're our Twitch hero. And there's definitely going to be a night of Strawberry now with a Twitch. Cannon. I'm sure we'll be in touch. Thank you guys for watching. We'll have this up on YouTube, and find us on the social medias because I can always answer a few questions every so often. I can't quite be as dedicated as this, but I hope you guys enjoyed it. I certainly had fun. Thanks for watching, and we will see you on Monday. We're talking about switching to a Thursday for releasing. What do you guys think about that? Let us know. I guess I don't have to say subscribe. This isn't YouTube. But thanks for watching, and we'll see you soon.